Ever wonder what Israel was like after Jesus left and the Romans besieged Jerusalem? All the Bible has to say about the Jewish Roman War is pretty cryptic and kind of hard to decipher. Nations rising up against nations, famine, earthquake, false prophets, the sun and the moon going dark. Did all of that really happen? And what would it be like if a scientist turned author put all of that history into story form? I know it's kind of a lot and it's kind of weird, but we're going to be talking about all of that and more on today's episode of Theology on Air. Well, welcome back to Theology on Air. We are, of course, a leg of Theology by the Pint, which is a ministry here in Houston where we get to drink delicious beer and eat delicious food and talk about delicious and spicy things around faith and culture, philosophy, theology, all that kind of stuff. Tricky parts of the Bible, tricky parts of religion. What does it all mean? Who's right? We have a lot of fun at those events. And if you live in the Houston area or you're visiting and you want to come to one of those, we would love it. We meet monthly. You can find out about all of our events on theologybythepint.org. You can also find out all kinds of other stuff like our mission and who we are, the leadership, and how to give us loads of cash so that we can keep doing the ministry that we're doing. But Theology on Air is the podcast where we get to do more niche kind of topics and really dive into particular things. And today we have a guest that's, I think, going to be really fascinating. He is a former scientist turned author, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Dr. Ward Stanford is the author of Cry for Jerusalem, a gripping four-part historical novel series that brings to life the drama and times of Flavius Josephus. If you don't know who that is and we just lost you, don't stick with us and come back because it's a really interesting historical figure. Before becoming a novelist, Ward enjoyed a 35-year career as a highly respected scientist with the U.S. Geological Survey. And now he brings that same intellectual rigor and curiosity to his research and writing, helping readers connect the dots between faith, history, I'm going to throw the word science in there, and God's unfolding plan. So this is a fun guest. Ward, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's a topic I
Yeah.
love to talk about.
um, so before we get into who the heck is Josephus and what was happening at the time that you wrote this whole series about, let's just learn a little bit about how did you come to be in this space? I would love to hear kind of who you are, what's your story, maybe how did you come to faith? What were you doing geologically for all those 35 years? Let's ramp up to the, the content for today.
Yeah, so I grew up in Indiana, small town in Indiana, and was raised in the Methodist Church from childhood. So I was a believer by the time I was a teenager. But I also had very much interest in science, and I ended up going to Purdue University, majoring in geology. And because I like science, I like being outdoors. And
Okay.
from there, I went to graduate school at Penn State, uh, specializing in hydrogeology. That's underground water, how the
Yeah.
water exists in the rocks and how much can we pump out and when does it get contaminated. So my 35 years at the USGS was doing research, developing tools to help states and localities better manage their water resources from both a supply and a contamination point of view.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been a believer for 35 to 40 years, and throughout my career, I've sort of had this science faith duality thing going on in my head because I got scientists on one side that kind of are puzzled that I'm a Christian, and I've got Christians on the other side that kind of wonder what I'm doing dabbling in geology. And so I spent a lot of time, you know, um, thinking about those things, and I'm a firm believer in the scientific method. I'm also a firm believer that the Bible is the authentic and authoritative word that God communicates to us, and I don't think there's any compromise in those two. That's a long story. I won't get into here,
Yeah.
but so the last several years, I've been to Israel too. Got very interested in Jerusalem and the temple. Started reading these theories about like where was the temple and what was it like during Herod's time.
Yeah.
And everybody was quoting this historian named, as you said, Flavius Josephus. I guess I've heard the name before, right? But and everybody's like quoting him or dismissing him, one of the two, depending on what he's saying. So I decide, well, I'm going to read this guy for myself, or at least try to. So I go out and I discover, though, that if you pick up a book called The Works of Josephus, it's this long, dense, like history, right? That's
Yeah.
a dense history textbook that's like really hard to read. But I did find a modern English translation of his second book called The Jewish Wars, which
Hmm.
goes from the time of like King Herod up through the fall of Jerusalem. And I discovered, reading this, hey, this guy's not just a historian writing it. He was intimately involved in everything that was going on during the
Hmm.
destruction of Jerusalem. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, these are crazy, dramatic stories and events going on here
Uh-huh.
during the whole Roman occupation and the destruction and everything. And he's like one of the main players. I'm like, how could I have been in the church for so long and never heard these dramatic stories? I mean, I'm probably like most everybody else. All I knew is like 70 AD. That's when the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem.
Right.
It was kind of predicted, and
It's just a
that's
bullet point on your timeline.
it's a bullet point on my timeline. And I didn't know that anybody knew anything else. Well, there's a whole lot that was known about all the details of how it happened. So I got to thinking, I'm like, well, maybe if somebody put this into story form, like a historical novel, people would actually be able to read it and find it really interesting. So that thought got in my head, and then I started teasing around in my head about, okay, who would the characters be, and what would be the dramatic sort of timelines and plots and things, and it all just sort of melded into like, oh,
Hmm.
this could just be incredible. So I just couldn't put it down. So I started this like about 6 years ago. I was still working. I knew, well, I could either like wait till I retire and try to write it myself, but I also knew that scientific writing and writing like a novel form are very different. Like in
Yeah.
science, it's just the facts, right? Nothing. And novel, it's all about dialogue and nuances. I'm like, I know I would not be good at that. So I actually hired a professional writer to help me
Okay.
flush all this out, right? So all the characters and plot lines are mine. He puts the actual words together, right, in
Yeah.
the way it should
And it's
read,
very
right?
well. I mean, I read a few sentences in preparation for this podcast, but it caught me. Just the first few
Yeah,
sentences, I was
and
like, "Oh, I'm
and
in." Yeah.
I think back about what sold me on historical novels. I read a couple of Ken Follett's novels. He's a famous historical novelist, and he wrote a couple about World War One and World War Two. And
Hmm.
I was really captured by how you could learn history while you're
Yeah.
engaged in this really exciting story. I'd be looking up, did that really happen? I'd have to go look it up on Google. I'm like, oh
Right,
yeah, I guess
right.
that did happen.
How much liberty did this guy take? Okay, so I want to ask a couple questions about Josephus
Okay,
and what was happening at that
yeah,
time, but this is completely unrelated to anything on your press kit or that we were going to talk about. But I'm just curious because you said you were doing hydrogeology, and I just
yeah.
finished going through Genesis, the flood account in Genesis, and one of the women in my Bible study was saying that recently there's been some pretty interesting data coming out about enormous amounts of water deep, deep, deep in basically sort of the center, as it were, of the earth. Do you know anything about that?
I know that's probably well. I know that how she's thinking about it is probably not true. I've seen a few
Okay.
headlines that will say lots of water found in the earth and deep in the earth,
Yeah.
but what that actually is like oxygen and hydrogen hydroxide
Okay.
molecules attached to minerals. So they would call that water, but they're just in the form of
Okay. They're not
in
yet, they
kind of
haven't formed water
mineral
yet.
form. It's not even water as they're
Okay.
speaking. It's just a headline grabber, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, that's
There you
still
go.
interesting. I mean, we don't want to believe something just because it, you know, sort of
Right.
adds a salacious or an interesting
Yeah,
piece to something we
there's a
already
lot of those.
study.
Almost any headline
Um,
I see has been sensationalized.
okay. So,
I don't know why we need more water in the middle of the earth. It comes out of my faucet all the time,
oh my
like an
gosh,
endless amount. So just
endless.
putting it out there.
Um, okay, so you mentioned that this Josephus guy was involved. I didn't realize that. All I know about Josephus is he was a Jewish historian who was in the time sort of right after the narrative that we get about Jesus in the Bible. And then
Yeah,
Jesus,
he writes
ascends to
about that.
heaven, sort of, what's that?
He does mention just he mentions Jesus and his history. Yeah,
Well, what I mean to say is, so Josephus is around sort of in the generation right behind all of that. And
Yeah,
he's just,
he was born in 33 or
oh,
30,
okay. So he was born the
37.
year Jesus.
He was born in 37, excuse me.
Oh, okay. So right after Jesus' death.
Right after Jesus, right?
Um, okay, and ascension. So Jesus is not on the earth at that time, but Josephus is writing about everything around this time that the church is being launched. So tell us just a little bit about Josephus. Like, who is he? He never became a Christian, is that correct?
No, it's there's no evidence that he became a Christian,
Yeah.
but he wrote down an incredible amount of history. So he's got two main works and a few others. The first one's called Antiquities, and it basically follows the Old Testament and adds a lot of commentary along the way.
Okay.
And then the second one is called the Jewish Wars, and that sort of picks up just about the time before, well, maybe a little bit before Herod, and continues up through the time of Jesus, all the way through 70, maybe about 72 AD, after the destruction of Jerusalem and Masada. So, yeah. So yeah, I was saying he was very involved, which means he's an upper class Jew, very educated. He speaks fluent Latin and Greek.
Hmm.
Um, he was sent to Rome at one point to try to free some Jewish rabbis there. So he had been to Rome and back. So when the rebellion started, and that was actually the rebellion started in 66, he was first chosen to lead the defense in Galilee against the Romans. There he was
Hmm.
captured. His fortress little city got surrounded, put under siege. He managed to get captured by the Romans. The Roman general at that time was Vespasian. Vespasian didn't kill him. He kept him on because this is a highly educated guy. Maybe he can help us if we keep him on
Hmm.
and ask him a lot of questions. So I won't give it. It's very interesting how that happened. I won't give away all the secrets, but long story short, well, this you kind of have to hear what happened. Josephus has this dream that a Roman general he's seeing in this dream is going to become ruler of the world.
Wow.
And he's quoting this, he's thinking about this verse that says, out of Israel will come one that will rule the world. We see that as a messianic prophecy, but he saw that. He then, when he went before Josephus, he said, hey, you're the guy I saw in my dream. You're going to become emperor.
Oh, wow.
And Vespasian's like, oh, you're crazy because there's like six other guys they're just waiting for the job, and I have no interest in it. Well, it turns out the next year a civil war started. A bunch of guys took turns being emperor, and then they rallied and said they want Vespasian as emperor. He becomes emperor, just like
Huh.
Josephus's dream.
Sort of
So they suddenly
accidentally
have
prophetic.
yeah, accidentally maybe, but they suddenly see Josephus in a higher light. They sort of free him then. We have a
Hmm.
lot of respect for you. We're going to free you, but he stayed with the Romans. He didn't go back to Jerusalem. He saw his own position as I need to help convince Jerusalem just to surrender because they brought four legions against them, and there's no way they're going to survive this.
Hmm.
So he's kind of the self-appointed liaison to. He sees himself as that to the Romans, except
But he's
the
still
Jews
loyal
didn't.
to his Jewish
In
compatriots.
his own mind, he's being loyal, but the
Yeah,
Jews, on the other hand, in the rebel see this guy is over there with the Romans, giving them all kinds of information. Who knows what? And
sure.
he even is given a platform to try to, in public, to try to convince them to surrender.
Huh.
So, and then it fails, right? So now Josephus is seen as the ultimate traitor to the Jews. He went over to the Roman side. You could just say, well, he just picked the winning side and went over there.
Right.
So he's still very highly thought of by the emperors. He goes back and he's put up in an apartment in like the emperor's palace and said, hey, write a history for us. So he's actually given them this opportunity to write this whole history of the Jews. That's why it's called the Jewish Wars. He writes all the history about how everything took place. And yeah, he's an amazing, controversial figure as well as an incredibly important historian for everything he recorded for us. But
Yeah.
gave us all this drama that I thought really should be put into novel form so people could have access
Yeah.
to
I mean,
them.
has anything like this been done before? Historical fiction around
No,
Josephus?
I kind of wonder why hasn't anything like this been done before? And there has been some that kind of do that, but not quite to the
Yeah,
extent I was doing it. But then once I got doing it and involved in it, I realized, well, you either have to be a novelist already that's skilled at this and willing to spend 4 or 5 years of your time investing in something that might not pay off, or you have
sure.
to be willing to pay somebody else to help you write it, which is what I ended
Yeah.
up doing,
All right.
which is,
I want to I want to go backwards a little bit just and get some history here for because the Bible does not actually say much about these events.
Guys, Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible. So we've crunched the numbers. And if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much. And now back to our show.
But there is a lot of discussion about, well, could the Bible have been meaning, discussion around these events at various points. We'll get to that in a second, but get us talk a little bit about what's happening on the scene in that part of the world leading up to the Jewish-Roman War. I mean, yes, you're right. All of us learned, if you went to seminary or even sort of basic biblical history, you learned that Rome, sacked Jerusalem in AD 70, Jerusalem fell. And that's it. But what led to that? Why is Rome? Because, in the time of Jesus, we have Rome kind of having these governors and people in and
right.
around Jerusalem, but they're kind of getting along,
Yeah,
ish.
yeah.
So what
Just,
happened to lead up to
just
this?
yeah, Josephus tells us all about how all that came to be.
Yeah.
And so actually back in Herod's time, Herod was not a governor. He was the appointed king. So the Romans just saw Judea as an ally. Herod could raise his own taxes, and that's what he did to do all these buildings. But then eventually, Romans just said, no, no, we're actually going to just kind of take over and assign governors. So that like Pontius Pilate then was a governor, and then they could actually tax the Jews and collect the money for themselves, which was, of course, very unpopular.
So basically cutting out the middleman kind of.
Cutting at the middleman, and right, like when Herod was king, the Romans didn't receive the tax money. Herod did, and used it
Okay.
to build things, which put money back into the economy. Now the
Right.
Romans are taking half of it for themselves all the time, which is really hard on the people. And so
Taxation
there's
without representation, baby.
yeah, there you go. So
Yeah.
after Pilate, there's a whole series of governors, which each become sort of more strict and hard on the Jews. But
Mm.
then and our story picks up on this, they have a governor named Gessius Florus. And this guy, he's the antagonist in our novel series, right? He's
Okay.
the bad guy. And Josephus points him out as the bad guy because basically his initial intent there was, hey, this Jewish temple's got a lot of gold in there, so I'm going to go in and just seize a bunch of it for myself.
Yeah.
So he picks a fight with the Jews and goes to Jerusalem and unleashes his soldiers, and they go out to slaughter about 1,000 people. And
Jeez.
but it's kind of settled. He doesn't manage to get into the temple, but the rebels have just had enough. And they come together, and a few thousand of them lay siege to Antonia Fortress there that's in Jerusalem where the Romans are, and they managed to kill all the Romans and kick them all out. This is
Oh, wow.
66.
Okay.
This is the starting of the
This is the
rebellion.
start
They
of the
kick
war,
them out.
right? 66 to
Start of the war,
70.
they kick them out. They're all cheering, and they declare themselves independent. They start minting their own coins. And of course, Nero is the emperor at this time. He doesn't want it. He's not going to put up with this.
Right.
This is our place. We're going to win it back. The problem. So the first thing they do is they bring the governor of Syria. There's a legion of soldiers there to put down such rebellions. So what's interesting is Judea is actually a sub-province of this province of Syria. So
Huh.
in Damascus is where the real governor is, and he's got a whole legion there at his disposal. So this guy, uh, uh,
Flores or Flora. What did you say?
Not Flores. Flores is in
Oh,
Jerusalem. He's like
okay.
over Judea. Um, their names are similar. Cestius Gallus, I think is his name. So
Okay.
this governor, his governor takes his legion, but he's not a very good general, but he's a politician, but he takes his legion to go in and lay siege to Jerusalem and try to get the rebels out of there, but he's
Hmm.
underestimates them. And the Jews actually defeat the Romans in 66. And
Okay.
I'm like, whoa, I thought they won. Here, the Jews win. So the Jews actually really, yeah, the Romans kind of realize they're not going to take it. They give up, start retreating, and then the Jews, there's thousands of rebels that just ambush them and almost destroy the whole legion. It's pretty incredible. But so now Nero's like, okay, we're not going to put up with this. I'm going to pick a really good general. He picks an experienced general named Vespasian, and now he sends 4 legions to Judea, along with a lot of auxiliary soldiers from local, they're like militias from local
Hmm.
territories. And so now the Jews see them coming. This is when they assign uh, Josephus to be the general defending Galilee. That's when Vespasian arrives, and it takes the Romans then like 3 years basically to build up enough to sort of like get rid of all, wipe out all the resistance in the rest of Judea and then surround Jerusalem and finally defeat it. And but by the time they get there, Vespasian has become emperor, so he puts his son Titus in charge. Titus is now the general in charge of just getting the rebels to surrender or destroying Jerusalem, whichever comes first. So yeah, there's a lot of history that's known between in that time period that leads up to that. So.
So then this just that gives us the beginning of it, and I guess this kind of
Right.
just goes on and on between 66 and 70 when
Yeah, so
there's sort of the final blow.
the whole novel series is set between like the end of 64 when Josephus goes to Rome first, and then you kind of get introduced to our main characters. There's like 5 main characters you're really following through the whole thing, all the way through the destruction of Jerusalem. Then it's 70, so it follows them through these few years with everything
Yeah.
going on.
Again, something that's not in the notes, and you may not have any thoughts on this, but when I was teaching Revelation, you have to then go back and make some kind of connections to the Olivet discourse, right? This is when Jesus is
Right,
talking about, some would say he's talking entirely about end times kind of things. Some would say he's talking about stuff that's going to happen in the time that we're talking about here.
right.
The destruction of Jerusalem. But so when I was dealing with all of that, I found some interesting things online about at the height of everything. So really right before the complete destruction, there's some lore around maybe you I'm curious if you know anything about this. There's some lore about the enemy Rome coming in with their chariots and whatever in such a way, and maybe it was the way the light was glinting or whatever, but there's almost this light kind of exchange that happens such that a lot of people believe there was some, like almost visible spiritual warfare happening at the same time, this kind of angelic presence. You think of like Lord of the Rings when Gandalf comes in with all of his troops.
So
um do you know anything about that, this
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
light?
So
Okay.
Josephus actually mentions these
Yeah, he
like
does.
he mentions these miraculous events that are occurring around the temple, a few different ones that happen during that time period, like
Hmm.
maybe the year leading up to the final siege and stuff. And so he mentioned those, and I actually write a
Hmm.
blog about
Okay.
like Josephus's quote miracles that they're seeing. So right on my website, cryforjerusalem.com, I've also got a blog section where I've written dozens of blogs about sort of a lot about this time period. That's like
Okay.
one of them.
Oh, so we have to go read the blog to find out if you
Yeah,
think there was
read
something
the blog.
supernatural.
There's like 7 different things that they see. Like somebody sees a vision of chariots into heaven.
Yep.
Another one is that the main doors to the temple weigh like so much it takes like 7 people to actually open them. They're bronze, they're huge.
Uh-huh.
But one morning they come out and the doors have opened all by themselves.
Ooh, I didn't know about that one.
And
Interesting.
then they said something about a what is it? A cow gave birth to a lamb.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that's
That sounds symbolic. Well,
symbolic.
I mean,
Yeah,
it stands to reason if you're going to be having battle on the most holy site, right? The temple and the place, I mean, the city where, Jesus ministered and then died. And I mean, it's this crucial landmark in biblical narrative that there might be something supernatural going on. So I think that's interesting. Okay, well, people will have to read the blog about that. Were you going to ask something?
Yes, in your books, are there like footnotes that indicate where do you tell stories using the eyes of Josephus about things that are documented, but will the reader know that it's a historical account?
You have to look them up. A lot of what's there is actual, are actually in Josephus. Of course, to create such a novel, we also have to add extra things in drama. So some of the things are added, but I would say almost all of the characters, the main characters are real, except we give Josephus a younger sister.
Okay.
Because
I'm just saying, like, as you're reading, it would be good to know what is
Oh,
an
this really
embellishment
happened.
and what is
Yeah.
something that's a
you're
claim.
going to have to go to Google a lot.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So, let's talk a little bit about the Olivet discourse. I mean, there's, Jesus says all these dramatic things about false prophets. I said some of this in the intro, and the sun and the moon, and people will flee for the hills, and you'll wish you're not pregnant because that would be a terrible time to be trying to have a baby.
Right. So
Do
this is the
you
Olivet Discourse. Yeah.
do you believe that the bulk of what's in that section, this is in Matthew 24, if anyone's like, what is she talking about? You can go read it in your own Bible.
You can read it. Yeah, it's called the Olivet Discourse because it was on the Mount of Olives.
Mount of Olives, right?
Right.
Um,
And so what I
you
believe
believe-
is,
Go
because
ahead.
people get very confused about this, right? But what I believe is that with Jesus's discourse, he's answering two different questions. And
Okay.
it's not clear. He doesn't stop and say, okay, here's answer one and here's answer two.
Sure.
Because at the beginning, he says, all of these buildings are going to be destroyed. And the disciples ask him, he said, when is this going to happen? And when will be the sign
Will be
of
the
the
sign,
time,
yeah.
end time, right? So he's really answering two questions. He's answering when is this city going to be destroyed, and what will be the end time signs? Because some of his answers sound like, yeah, this could be 70 AD, and other ones sound like, well, that's clearly like off in the future. So
Not yet. Yeah.
my opinion is he's really answering two different questions, but he doesn't actually like explicitly say which one he's answering.
And do so you don't think that the disciples meant, so I see those two questions. When will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the
Right.
age? Do you don't think at that point his disciples kind of thought those were one and the same?
I mean, we know how clueless they were. They didn't even know he was going to get crucified, right?
Oh. So maybe
yeah.
they were, maybe they weren't. We don't
I
know.
mean, I don't think anybody would have really picked up that maybe those are two different things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have all this terrible stuff happening, and it really is it is dramatically awful. I mean, I went and read some of the passages from Josephus, the Jewish wars, and if he's right, and I don't know why he would make this up, him being Jewish and not ever converting to Christianity kind of helps his credibility in some sense because he's not sort of one of us, as it were, like just trying to make things true that sort of back up the claims of Scripture.
Although a lot of people will try to claim he's either biased toward the Romans or towards the Jews, depending on which viewpoint you take. You could argue that he's biased, and people try to. But in general, he seems to be just a reliable historian trying to record the history.
Old school journalist.
Okay.
So I remember reading things about at the height of the destruction, people were resorting to cannibalism, eating trash, eating grass because they were starving.
Eating their own children.
Yeah. I mean, so when we think about this kind of stuff and we think, oh, history is boring, or the history of the Bible and all of that is boring. It's not boring at all.
It's not boring at all. It's not only some of it's gruesome, but the battles and how they describe them, boy, it wasn't boring. And that would be the last thing.
Yeah.
You say about this, but
sounds actually a lot like the first Crusade, where it was
probably there was definitely a famine. So here's the problem. The real problem was before the Romans showed up, there's two factions of rebels, and three actually, but two main ones inside the city fighting each other for the domination of the city.
Oof.
So they're shooting, they've got the city cordoned off into two districts shooting at each other, and they get desperate and the one side burns the other side's food supply, and then the other reciprocates. So they burn each other's massive food supplies, and then a week later, the Romans show up, put siege on the city.
What was the rationale for that civil
They were,
unrest?
I'm gonna starve off my other rebels by getting rid of all their food, and then so both sides did it.
Right, but why do that? Wouldn't they be on this quote same side?
Right at that point, they're fighting each other. Right. That's
Right.
all
Well,
they
I'm
can
asking
do.
why. Why were they fighting each other? Do you know?
Oh, well, I mean, they're both rebels and think that they want to be in charge. So that you've
So
got
just the power of it.
They're like gangs.
Simon Bar Giora, he was one of them. The other one was John of Gachala from Galilee. So one was kind of a Galilean sect, and the other was a Jerusalem sect, and those two didn't like each other anyway, right? So they're fighting over who's going to be the top dog, right?
Are there
Of course,
many?
the Romans show up, they do unify, but now they're surrounded and they don't have enough food. And there's probably a million people jammed into the city. So, and this is what Josephus reports, and a lot of them criticize him, saying, well, there's no way that a million people lived in Jerusalem. But you have to realize two things. One was the Romans had been going around the rest of Judea, destroying all the towns, and everybody was fleeing to Jerusalem for safety. So half the country was all fleeing into Jerusalem. And then it was Passover.
Yep.
Everybody went to Jerusalem for Passover anyway. So the city was crammed full of people for those two reasons when the Romans showed up. So there's way too many people and not near enough food.
Yeah.
So you're on a siege and there's just massive famine.
I was just going to ask if there were Christians in Jerusalem at this time, or if they had sort of left. I guess it doesn't matter. Although I am thinking about.
He doesn't really say.
Yeah, I am thinking about the
Fleeing to the hills thing.
No, Acts
You
15.
can imagine.
Sorry. No. I mean, I think the preterism conversation, we went over it kind of quickly. I mean, that is an interesting conversation. So I think that's
I've written more about that, right?
Okay, I think that's a 10-cent word like our audience should be familiar with.
Yeah. What does that mean, right?
Yeah. So I mean,
I
don't think preterism is a bad word. It just means that, prophecy will be fulfilled. There is a debate around whether, essentially, I mean, a hyper preterist believes that all prophecy in the Bible,
including Revelation, right?
Right. That's been fulfilled. Partial preterists say that, well, some has been fulfilled, but some is yet to be fulfilled. And so
I'm probably currently in that camp, right, where it seems like too much of it just describes what's going on here. That some of the prophecies, and even in Revelation, are likely referring to this time period. But
you're saying Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, likely talks about the 66 to 70 war, or the 70 destruction of the temple, and so
half of it. Some of Jesus's words clearly sound like they're more distant,
right?
But,
and
a lot of it really describes,
and
when he says this generation will not pass away, that seems to clearly indicate the 70 AD fall, because that's the same generation of people.
Right.
Some of them listening are still alive. Right.
It's like Bill Clinton said, it depends on what you means, but yeah, I mean, like when he says to go into the hills for safety.
Yes.
I mean, we're in Houston. We would have to go about 8,000 miles to get to hills from where we are. So that's why some people say the prescription is clearly a reference to people with flat roofs.
If you've been to Jerusalem, you realize how hilly that place is, right?
Yeah.
They're definitely in the hills.
So I think partial preterism is a good way to combat a lot of the silly apocalyptic, stuff that goes on in evangelicalism and Christianity today, right? So, where every earthquake and every war and every famine becomes from the Olivet Discourse, this is the sign of the end times. And anyway, I think the books could be really insightful in terms of
one of the views which I find quite perhaps convincing is that the book of Revelation, John actually wrote it before the fall of Jerusalem.
You're of that mind, or you're saying that is
I find that argument pretty convincing. There's like a couple of books.
The early writing theory,
right. That John.
Well, then you would put everything before that, right? You would put all the Gospels before 70.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Well, we've had lots of those discussions on this podcast, so I think it's not
right.
foreign. But
But if that's the case, then, for example, his discussion about the witnesses in the temple and things, the temple still exists, right? So he's not even talking about a future temple. He's talking about the temple in Jerusalem.
Well, some would say, and I think I'm probably with you, but some would say, a lot of what's in Revelation is the Spirit took me to blah, blah, blah. And so that it's a
Or yeah,
visionary kind of
no,
thing. It's a vision of the
I
future. It's a
understand.
vision
Yeah,
of,
that's a common view, and it's understandable. Yeah,
so it could very well be that, he was taken by the Spirit to see a vision of when the temple is restored.
right.
And the
Yes,
two witnesses could be a callback to, Elijah. And I mean, there's so many possibilities.
right,
If
right.
you Google who are the two witnesses, you'll get probably 14 different explanations. It's Zerubbabel and so and so. And anyway,
Yeah, well, I've got my own explanation because, well, I don't know. I wouldn't call it an explanation. I just found it really curious that if Revelation actually is referring to this time period, I'm like, okay, were there any people speaking out during the siege
mm-hmm,
period from the
mm-hmm,
walls of Jerusalem, warning them that the city is about to be destroyed? And the
hmm,
answer is yes.
mm-hmm.
Josephus was one of them. He stood on the walls and warned everybody,
Oh,
you
wow.
need to, this place is about to be destroyed. And this
Yeah.
other is a really interesting guy named Yeshua from
Great name.
Galilee. Yeah, great name, common name. Shows up like a crazy street preacher. All he does is wander around Jerusalem saying, "Whoa, woe to
Whoa.
Jerusalem!
Yeah.
Whoa, woe
Huh.
to Jerusalem! Your end, the end is coming." For 3 years,
That's
he
right
does
from
this.
Revelation.
Yeah, he's doing this the whole time period. People think he's crazy, but everybody knows about him. It's this guy
Huh.
wandering around. Jerusalem is
Did you weave that story into the books?
yes.
Okay, so I'm interested to read the books. We don't have a ton of time yet left, but I'm curious, like when you're turning such a dramatic story into a novel series, how do you pick sort of the main figures? And what I want to know is there a love story?
Oh, there's a little bit of that in there. Yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, I didn't want this to be like completely a Jewish story about here are the Jews and this is how they saw it. I wanted to have different viewpoints.
sure.
So I took a couple of people that Josephus also mentioned and then like developed them into full characters. So
Okay.
Josephus goes to Rome. On the ship at sea, he ends up meeting a Roman soldier, this upper class Roman woman, and her
This
servant.
part is true, or this is in the story?
This isn't the story.
Okay.
No, this is added so that we can introduce you to the characters in book
Sure.
one,
Okay.
right?
Got it.
So right, so this soldier that they meet in pretty dramatic fashion out at sea, his name is Nicanor. He's actually mentioned in Josephus as a Roman soldier, a friend of his. So
Okay.
he doesn't get much mentioned in the book, but we just take him. Okay, this guy's a main character. And then the woman they meet there, who they actually save at sea, and she and Josephus kind of have this tacit kind of admiration, kind of
There's
love thing going
sparks.
on. Yeah, spark, lots of spark there.
Okay.
They go and they're invited to her house in Rome once they get to Rome, and it turns out she's best friends with Emperor Nero's wife. Her
Oh,
name is
neat.
Cleopatra, or Cleopatra, Nick Cleo. She's a real character. You can Google her. Yep, that was somebody. Because they also find out she is engaged to be married to this bad guy, Gessius Florus, who becomes the antagonist
Yeah.
and the governor of Judea.
Ooh,
So
intriguing.
she's so then they come to Judea. She's in Judea as his wife, the bad guy's wife. But she and the emperor's wife were Jewish sympathizers, so she has sympathy for the Jews.
Hmm.
She's got the hots for Joseph. That's his name, right? At the same
Yeah.
time, and right, her husband, the bad guy, really starts abusing her.
Uh-oh.
So eventually, she has to kind of like escape. This is all like part of the drama that goes on,
Love it.
and right then we're like eventually in book two when Josephus gets captured, Joseph gets captured. She's rescued from her husband, goes to see Joseph, who's now in prison, and says, "Well, you need to go to Jerusalem, and my parents will hide you there.
Hmm.
She gets smuggled into Jerusalem. She's hiding out in Jerusalem the whole time. And at this time, her brother back in Rome becomes emperor.
Yeah.
So now the word gets out that the emperor's sister is hiding out somewhere in Jerusalem, so we've got all these drama lines sort of.
Interesting. Okay. Well, don't say too much. So people will
Yeah,
have to read themselves.
yeah, I can't give you too many spoilers here, just kind of the feel of it. Well, and her servant Saeed is an auxiliary sort of militia with the Romans, and he's like his mother was Syrian, his father was African. He's kind of looking for his father who left when he was young, and he's in the Legion somewhere, but he's
Hmm.
uh he's kind of like one of the main characters. He and Nicanor get into trouble together, and then yeah, and then there's Joseph, and then there's his younger sister, who a lot of women and young readers like her because she's at home. When Josephus is off in Rome, she was exploring some of the tunnels under Jerusalem. She gets attacked and raped by Roman soldiers,
Hmm.
but she gets rescued by one of the older rebel gentlemen and taken and saved basically. But he's he kind of knows martial arts, and he's blind, right? And
I mean, Krav Maga, that's Israeli, right? So,
he ends up
go ahead.
training her how to be one of the Sicarii. The Sicarii, there's a whole book
Uh-huh.
written about the Sicarii. They were Jewish assassins
Mm-hmm.
at the time. They would look out for Roman collaborators who they would eliminate, right? So she's like an innocent, girl at home by day and like secret assassin by night going out.
Ooh, I love it. Okay. Well, for time's sake, I want to circle back to something you said you wanted to talk about at the beginning, and then we'll probably have to end with this. You mentioned that for 35 years you were a scientist, and fellow scientists were sort of baffled by your faith, and Christians were sort of baffled by your love of science. I mean, as you've been exploring these concepts and this part of history, where has that kind of nestled in? Like, did your scientific background kind of inform the way that you view this part of history? Were you able to kind of go and do some fact checking to ease your science-minded mind? I mean, how does that all kind of work?
My scientific influence really would be in in the way I looked at the whole project. To me, I'm kind of a research nerd. Like I like researching history too. So,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, like one of the things was I wanted to find out where the temple was on the Temple Mount. So I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to research. And there was one storyline that seemed really good, but I can't just believe one side of something. I have to go
Right.
like look at both sides. That's my science point of view.
Yeah.
We can't publish anything and completely ignore facts of data that are not uh, that kind of disprove it, right? So yeah, so researching the whole thing, I'm a stickler with details, right? So the whole philosophy is I don't want to write anything that is disproven by what's been written by Josephus. That's
Yeah.
not true. But on the other hand, you can add things to the story that just seem that may not have happened, but are certainly plausible, right? So there's a
Sure.
lot of that going on here. So,
Okay. Well, Ward, this is great. I'm looking forward to reading them. And if people want to check out some of the blogs that you mentioned or buy the book, how do they do that? How do they find you and or the book?
right. I'm at cryforjerusalem.com, all one word, but they're all on Amazon. So you just type in Cry for Jerusalem, Amazon will take you right there. All the books are there. You can get them in paperback, you can get them in Kindle. I hired a British voice actor. He's got them all in Audible, so he's
Oh, that's
great.
cool.
He does different voices for different characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your story with us, stories,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. It's
And
fun.
yeah, and to our listeners, I mean, we're thankful that you guys are here. Again, go to theologybythepint.org to learn more and maybe even see some of the other podcasts that we've done. We didn't say this at the beginning, but anytime you want to Give us a review, 5 stars. What are all the things we're supposed to say? Subscribe. Do all the things you're supposed to do to help us continue this. We really appreciate it. Until we see you next time, we encourage you, as always, to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed. And
Thank
that
you very much.